I'm sorry, but I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. In this world there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate. We think too much and feel too little. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness. Without these qualities, life will be violent. And all will be lost. All will be lost. Do not despair. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die. Dictators die. And the power they took from the people will return to the people. Will return to the people. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world to do away with greed. Now let us fight to free the world, to fulfill that promise. Let us all unite.
Hello, folks. Welcome to the Corporation Nation. It is Friday, November 8th, 2013, and I'm your host, Clint Richardson. With me today, now I received a phone call on air that some of you might remember. It was maybe a week and a half ago by a gentleman who went by the name of Dave, and his email was no tax man. What was it? No tax man dot. Oh shoot, I had it in front of me. Dave, what is your email again?
NoTaxman@dmv.com.
NoTaxman@dmv.com. So I was curious about this because he sounded like a very, very well-learned man, and so I contacted him and asked him if he'd be with us today. What I didn't know, and as a disclaimer, is that he is actually responsible or partly responsible for the advertisement that you hear here on RBN called escapeharassment.com. So I'm going to preface this by saying that I'm not associated with that in any way, and that this is not a sponsorship of any way. This was just kind of a fluke. And I'm actually kind of happy it happened because before I support anybody or anything, I like to learn what it is that they are selling, or offering people to help them. So I'm actually very pleased because I've been curious about this commercial I keep hearing myself. So let's turn this into an educational experience here, sir. First of all, tell us about yourself and how you're affiliated with the escapeharassment.com.
Well, we began doing research into the crookedness back in 1972, the first phony oil shortage called the Arab oil embargo of 1972, and we realized that something was rotten in Delaware in our case, but that's when we put aside all our money-grubbing activities and got off the endless treadmill of debt and taxes to do research, and we began networking with other research organizations and gurus, but only those that could prove that what they were teaching was actually based on law and could in fact be proven that it worked. That's all we were interested in, is teaching people what works, not woulda, shoulda, coulda, and they can't do this to us because they're obviously doing it anyway. So anyway, that's how we got started. And essentially, our research has broken down the studies into four major areas of interest, which is land taxes, how to remove your property from the rolls of land that's presumed to be regulatable and taxable, and driver's licenses and car titles and such, called an MSO, Manufacturer's Statement of Origin, is the actual ownership document, and the Internal Revenue Service. And if you have income from the government, then you do owe the tax back. But if you're not working for the government and you do not get a paycheck from some government agency, you're not involved in the internal revenue, but people are not aware of the distinction. They think everybody is working for an employer, which is a lie. If it's not a government agency or a government corporation, there's not an employer. The very definition of an employer is a government agency or government corporation. but the people you work for are being lied to by their communist lawyer advisors and accountants, and they all make money on the system, so it's to their advantage for people to not know the distinction. So they're stealing people's money and earnings because the people they work for are fraudulently misrepresenting that they're an employer, government agency, when in fact they're not. And
even though their very incorporation is with the government? I mean, when you go and you start a business, you incorporate, you're actually incorporating with government.
Well, some people do. Some people maintain a private sole proprietorship. But that's not the problem. The problem is that internal revenue is only applicable to income. It's the income tax, and it's collected by voluntary compliance, and they continue to trick people into volunteering. And that's mainly what our research has taught, is how to discontinue being tricked into volunteering, and in fact how to unvolunteer so that you're no longer getting fleeced by the Internal Revenue Service, in spite of that the people you work for are wrongly believing they are employers, and you therefore are thrust into the role of employee inaccurately and incorrectly, and in an effort to justify their theft of your work. But we teach people to do not let them continue to get away with that. Expose the truth.
And you're basically, I think we're in agreement here that basically what you're promoting on this advertisement on your site is that basically everything is a contract, and you're teaching people essentially to not accept the contract. Do not sign anything. Do not do anything unless you know what it is you're getting into, because a contract is only valid if you agree to it.
Absolutely correct. The definition of a contract, the very definition of a contract, is to offer acceptance of that offer, at which point in time a contract arises by the acceptance, and both parties are immediately bound and held to specific performance of that newly arisen contract by the acceptance. And that's why the Howard Griswold Research Group teaches, do not accept. Do not get tricked into the appearance trap or the acceptance trap. And by avoiding those two snares, you can deprive the enemy of tricking you into the resulting or subsequent contract. And if there is no contract, they cannot apply their contract debt collection code title and section numbers. There can be no code contract debt collection code title numbers if there is no contract.
Well, let's take an example of this. Let's take, for instance, the driver's license. Now, what you're presented at the DMV when you go through all of their little tests, and they approve you to give up your right of travel and instead drive, which is of course a legal term in commerce. What they present is not a typical contract, because what they're presenting you is what's called a unilateral contract. In other words, you alone are signing that contract. There's no one on government side signing any contract. What it's doing is presenting a set of rules that you're going to follow, and you are, when we say unilateral, of course, we mean one person handing over their whatever it is they're handing over through the contract, their natural rights, in order to obtain privileges from government. So these are special kind of contracts, because they're only agreements by you to follow certain set of rules.
Driving definitely is a privilege, but people don't understand the true meaning and definition of drive. If you're charging money, you're driving. If you're not charging money, you're not driving. If you're using your private property automobile to charge money with, like a taxi cab or a bus or something, then it is not your private property car. It is a vehicle in commerce, because you're using it by charging money in commerce, so it and you become liable to the licensing requirements of vehicles in commerce.
Right. All right. Stay with us, folks. We'll be back with No Tax Ban right after these messages. welcome back. We are in truly the Corporation Nation. You know, there's a reason I named this the Corporation Nation radio program, and apparently our guest agrees with me, as his website talks very specifically about it says what actually exists today is rule by corporations, meaning government agencies and headless, unaccountable fourth branch. And we've certainly talked a lot about those agencies and all of the private associations that make law. You know, it occurs to me, sir, that, and it's, I don't know how to say this really, but, you know, I've met several people who have been fighting this fight and trying to keep this information and this movement alive. It struck me at my funny bone when you said that you were doing this since 1972, because that was actually the year I was born. And that makes me 41 years old. And I find it ironic because, you know, I've met several, had calls and been in contact with people like yourself. What's that? I've gotten several calls and several different contacts with people who...
You're fading out. I cannot hear you.
Really? What's happening?
Are we still connected?
Okay. I don't know what happened. There's been a movement, and it's basically been a bunch of people who have tried to keep this information alive over the decades. And what I see is, unfortunately and sadly, a dying generation that is literally not going to be here in the next decade or so. That information is literally dying with them. And these men, you know, spent their lives pouring through books so that what we have on the internet today is readily available for people like me. And I want to give my respect to all the people like yourself and the people that you're talking about that are part of this, because without the efforts of these men, I would not be able to know what I know. I would not be able to study the things I study, because most of those things, the things that led me to finally understand a lot of this, and I still feel like a novice compared to people, comes from men like you and men who have done what you've done and what these people have done that you're representing. So I just wanted to say thank you for all your efforts since before I was born, and that I feel a responsibility and a duty to carry on, even though I've had just a crash course in this internet generation. I feel the duty to carry on where you folks have guided us. So again, I want to just share that with you, and hopefully you'll take that in the spirit intended.
Your phone line is really dying out. Anyway, before the phone completely disconnects, anyone who's interested in more information, send an email to notaxman@dmv.com and ask for the information on how to unvolunteer from IRS and how to remove your land from the rolls of property that's presumed regulatable and taxable. And we'll send you an email about how to do that. I can hardly hear a host any longer. The line's going so quiet.
Well, I don't know what to say. Is this better?
Hello?
I'm
on a hardwire phone, too.
Well, I'll tell you what, I can call in after the next break, and maybe that'll help. We can continue the show. I apologize. I don't know what's going on. Why don't you go ahead and tell people more about the website, and I'll shut up until the break comes.
Okay. Well, essentially, if you have a paycheck from a government organization, then you do have income. The United States Supreme Court has ruled that income is corporation gain and corporation profit. So live natural people cannot, by definition, have income. Only corporations have income, because that's what income is corporation gain and corporation profit. people have private property labor from their private property bodies, and that's their private property earnings, not corporate income. So because the people you work for are not aware that they're not an employer, which throws you into the realm of being an employee of a corporation, they're taking people's money out, withholding or whatever they call it, and it amounts to theft of your private property earnings, labor. And you can withdraw from that because the entire income tax is collected by a doctrine called voluntary compliance, and you can learn how to unvolunteer or discontinue volunteering by going to that escape-tickets-irs-court.org website and activating or implementing Howard Griswold's strategy number 1, which teaches people how to avoid or escape the appearance trap and the acceptance trap. So people can just go to the website and read and study those definitions at the FAQ page. The frequently asked questions page gives you the definitions of contract and of appearance and of acceptance, and that's what Howard strategy number 1 prevents and avoids being tricked into the falling for the appearance trap or the acceptance trap, and avoids the subsequent resulting contract, and people are not aware of that. So he teaches do not accept any of their offers or letters or documents or presentments, because by doing so, you create the contract for them. And we do not want to do that, certainly not intentionally. And the other thing you'll learn on this email, and you request it from notaxman@dmv.com, is how to remove your land, your private property land, from the rolls of property that's presumed regulatable and taxable because you broke the law. You're not aware of it. They never told you, but it's illegal to record private property into the public property records. But the lawyers conveniently don't tell you that. So they get you to record or let them record your private property land deed into the public property records, even though they never purchased or condemned for public use and compensated the owner or seller or you with any consideration. So it effectively, by recordation, it becomes a taking of your private property without the just compensation. And that's unconstitutional.
Well, I've noticed that I'm on the phone now, so hopefully this is better. I've noticed that when they take your home for, let's say tax evasion, if you will, when the IRS claims that you haven't paid your taxes, let's say you owe $20,000, and they take your home that's worth, say, $200,000, they don't seem to divvy up the difference, do they?
No. Well, they're not out to pay you. They want to steal your property. They don't want to pay for anything. But as long as you're enjoying the benefit of them holding your land in trust for you, which is what happens when your private property deed is recorded into the county's public property records, it becomes no longer your land. It's now the county's trust estate property, not yours. And that's why you get to enjoy the benefit of having their code inflicted upon the land, and the county can come and take the county's children out of the county's house and turn the child over to the Department of CPS, Child Protective Services.
Protective Services, yeah. I mean, basically everything can be registered.
Or they can regulate and tell you have to paint your rain gutters or you have to keep the lawn mowed down to a certain
right.
And they can condemn your house as unfit for human habitation because there are spider webs in the wood pile outside.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we'll be right back, so stay with us.
Living in the street. Oh, there's a solution.
Scientists have been battling to understand what this unappealing object is all about. What the object is all about.
Information in the form of energy streams in simultaneously through all of our sensory systems in the form of energy, our sensory system, and then it explodes into this enormous collage of what this present moment looks like, what it feels like, and what it sounds like. It explodes into this enormous
Nation. I've switched to the landline phone, so hopefully we won't have any more technical issues. With me today is No Tax Man at dmv.com. That's the website, or the email that you can contact Dave at. And we are talking about a commercial that played in the first set of commercials called escapeharassment.com. I've always been curious about it, and we have someone from there to explain all this to us. And we'll take phone calls from the audience, because I'm sure a lot of you have been curious about that commercial and wanted to get some answers yourself. So now I'm really curious. This is one of the things that really has thrown me for a loop in this whole process of learning and everything, is the concept of money. Money is literally, and I'm finding, is literally the root of all evil. I mean, it's literally the root. I mean, what good is the IRS unless there's money for it to demand and to tax? What good are all these agencies and government unless it has a currency that it requires people to use? And I find myself more and more repulsed by every dollar that I see, and I mean, at the moment, I try not to use any at all. It's very difficult. And we talked off air about the law of necessity, and that was my conclusion as well on my own by reading the maxims of law, and the law of necessity is actually one of those, where if you're going to die of starvation because you don't want to participate in this fraud we call the dollar, well, guess what? You have a necessity to your own well-being in life to eat. You know, and it's that kind of thing that has always trumped me. How do you utilize a copyrighted monetary script such as the dollar without being liable for the tax that's charged to it?
Well,
and all the rules.
The problem is Congress is not obeying its authorizing and enabling legislation called the Constitution. The supreme law of the land, Constitution, mandates that Congress shall coin the money and regulate the value thereof. It does not say Congress shall rent the nation's money supply at interest from a private corporation owned by foreigners. And yet, that's exactly what Congress has done. And there have been some lawsuits about this. One is called U.S. Representative Mike Synar, S-Y-N-A-R, versus Synar, and the other case was Synar versus Bowsher, B-O-W-S-H-E-R, who at that time was the head of the GAO, the Government Accounting Office. And in those cases, the United States Supreme Court came down with the ruling that Congress, being a legislative branch body, does not have authority to delegate away to an executive branch body, such as the GAO, a constitutionally mandated obligation or responsibility. Now, if they cannot do that with the GAO, they, by the same token, cannot do it with the Federal Reserve Corporation. Congress does not have the authority to delegate to an executive branch body a constitutionally mandated responsibility.
Well, but isn't Congress creating those? I mean, Congress is creating those executively mandated bodies. I mean, the Congress is the creator of those agencies in the first place. So,
and the people are the ones who authorized Congress to be created in itself in the first place. And the orders from on high from the people is Congress shall coin the money and regulate the value thereof, and Congress ain't doing it. So there's where the main problem is, because money's just a medium of exchange. The Indians used to call it wampum, and they sold Manhattan Island to the white men for 23 beads, 23 shiny beads. I don't know if they got a bargain or not, but anyway, that is what passed for, at that time in history, that's what passed for money. And I think
money can be anything. I mean, a cow can be traded for a chicken, and both of those can be considered money, just like beads or seashells or marks in a stick. I mean, there is no limit to what money can be, and unfortunately, that includes slaves. Again, what we're talking about here is Well, I mean, I guess you could compare it to the roads or the highways. You know, if again, the right to travel on the land shall not be hindered. So the concept that you can only drive or travel on a road that was built by taxpayer money, if you're a taxpayer, is actually pretty ridiculous. Because in that case, I wouldn't be able to travel at all.
Well, the problem is the word presumption in the law case International Shoe Corporation versus State of Washington. The United States Supreme Court came down with the ruling that the way the courts get jurisdiction is by presumption, and the presumption is that you, me, Howard Griswold, everyone is enjoying purposeful, there's your intent, purposeful availment of some benefit, privilege, license, title of nobility, like taxpayer of, citizen of, resident agent of, member of the corporation, some title of nobility or some opportunity offered from government. They presume, and therefore you're being tricked into and accepting and enjoying these benefits and privileges without realizing it. So the only way to overcome that presumption is to have a sworn under penalty of perjury, notarized signature, affidavit, or declaration that you did not intend to be enjoying any benefits, privileges, licenses, titles of nobility, or opportunities offered from government. Now, the only way they can overcome that would be to put in a countermanding declaration or affidavit, again, sworn under penalty of perjury and notarized signature, and those wimpy wusses are not about to do that. None of those government workers will do that because, number one, they would be lying, and number two, they don't have the gumption to do it. So once you put in your declaration or affidavit that you did not intend to enjoy these benefits and privileges, that pulls the jurisdiction presumption rug out from under all of those courts.
Well, let's be clear. What does the word enjoyment actually mean?
All we do is research and education into what the laws say and how we can avoid being tricked into being subject to corporation rules and regulations and codes and statutes and ordinances that do apply to subjects of the corporation, government, the corporation nation. And the way you can avoid those tricks and traps is to implement Howard Griswold's strategy number one, which is offered at the escapeharassment.com or escape-tickets-irs-court.org website. There's two different names for the same website, but strategy number one still offers how to avoid getting tricked by the Communist BAR Lawyer Club into appearance trap or the acceptance trap and the subsequent resulting contract. And then you're held to those contracts, right or wrong, good or bad, like it or don't like it. That's what they do. And you either pay or go to jail. And the contract you were tricked into. And that's why Howard teaches, do not accept those offers. Do not accept those presentments or letters or documents or any of those pieces of paper, regardless of what the title and wording may be. The definition of contract has not changed, and the definition of appearance has not changed, and the definition of acceptance has not changed. And until we avoid and escape getting tricked into constantly accepting their offers and presentments, we're going to be held continuously to these contracts, even without our knowledge and without our understanding. And that's
so
the reason they never have, on these contracts, they never have a valid signature. The contracts are void because none of those signatures are your or my authorized signature. And the reason it's not authorized signature is because they never gave us the full disclosure. They never provided us the information or knowledge upon which to form the intent, the intention to have accepted or refused or denied or enjoyed
Well, again, I mean, my point is that government doesn't sign anything. Government's not a man, so it can't sign a contract. That's the point I want to make. Is that, again, it's a unilateral contractual obligation. There's no one over there to enforce it if it's a fraud anyway. So we'll be back and we'll talk about that. And I also want to hear about Mr. Griswold. Stay with us, folks.
Is this real, or is this just rhyme? The world is like a ride. You think it's real, it's just a rhyme. We can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. The world is like a ride. You think it's real, it's just a rhyme. We can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. Ride goes up and down, round and round. It has thrills and chills, and it's very brightly colored. Up and down, round and round, and it's very loud. Don't worry, don't be afraid, it's just a rhyme. We can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. Why are we here?
I think we're part of a greater wisdom than we will ever understand. A higher order. Call it what you want. Know what I call it? The big electron. The big electron. The big electron. It doesn't punish, doesn't reward. It doesn't judge at all. It just is, and so do we. For a little while.
Back, Operation Nation. I'm Clint Richardson, and with me, the representative from a commercial you might have heard. Actually has two sites. Peoples-rights.com is more of a study and research site, and then there's escapeharassment.com. So tell me about Mr. Griswold, Howard Griswold, and what is his story and his history?
He's a researcher and been researching into the Constitution and laws for years and years. He's written several books and pamphlets. The first was titled Paper Arrows, because that's what, at that point in time, he was revealing that they're using paper as if it was a bow and arrow. It's a weapon against us. And then he's written some other books. I'm not really too familiar with the books that he's written, but I have studied his teachings in addition, and that's what I'm interested in, is the bottom line. And the bottom line is, what you mentioned earlier, corporations do not have a voice. They do not have vocal cords or ears or eyes. Anything with a corporation has got to be in writing. It has to be in a contract, because corporations don't have a voice or ears or eyes, so everything has to be in writing. And under that definition of a contract, in order to enforce any contract, they have to establish the primary elements, the three basic primary elements of jurisdiction before they can enforce the contract, and they are person, place, and thing. In law, that's called in personam, and the place is called the venue, and the thing in law is called the subject matter, which is the contract. The proof of that is a cop can pull you over, but he cannot write you a ticket until after he has established all three of those primary preliminary elements of jurisdiction. And that's why he asks you to self-convict yourself by producing the driver's license, which is the in personam jurisdiction, and he enters that on his metal clipboard. And then he asks you for the registration card for the automobile, and that's the second element. That's the venue or place. And we self-convict ourselves by producing that. And then he asks for the evidence of insurance or proof of insurance card, which, again, we dutifully reach in the glove compartment and produce that. And we give him that evidence. And once he has all of these three elements, primary requirements of person, place, and thing, he then knows he has the authority and jurisdiction to write the ticket on behalf of his employer, the corporate government agency, Department of Motor Vehicles, or whatever. And that's covered in the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. Rule 12b-1 is the subject matter. 12b-2 is the venue or place, and Rule 12b-3 is the in personam or person. And the fact that they have not proved that you are a fiction person and you are not in their fiction places, like a numbered zip code zone or a two-capital letter abbreviation or a fiction called the state of corporation or a other zone or area or district like a 10 miles square district of Columbia, 100 square miles, or a fort, dockyard, arsenal, magazine, or fiction territory or fiction possession. They presume you are. And once you point out that they have failed to prove that you're a fiction living in one of their fiction areas, zones, or districts, and they do not have your authorized signature on any document, therefore they do not have the subject matter, therefore they have not complied with Rule 12b-1, Rule 12b-2, or 12b-3, and therefore you and I can put in a Rule 12b-6 motion to strike the plaintiff's claim for their failure to state the claim upon which relief can be granted because they have failed to prove under Rules 12b-1, 12b-2, and 12b-3, they've failed to prove the in personam, the venue, or the thing, subject matter, prerequisite requirements. So they do not have the jurisdiction or authority to enforce their contract because they've failed to state a claim upon which relief can be granted, and therefore the court should strike the plaintiff's claim because they do not have...
Let's play devil's advocate here now. The typical person would say, well, wait a minute. He's going to ask me for my driver's license, and of course I'm going to produce that. I have to identify myself, right?
Well, according to Eddie Craig, who is not on RBN, but he has 3 questions that you can ask people. The first one is, Officer, I hereby invoke my constitutionally protected right to remain silent. And you have to say that phrase, constitutionally protected right, now that the Supreme Court has rewritten the Miranda wording. Now anything you say will and can be used against you. Now anything you say or fail to say, anything you do not say will and can be used against you. So anyway, according to Eddie Craig's research, the first thing you ask the arresting officer is, Officer, I hereby invoke my constitutionally protected right to remain silent.
Well, now,
and
wait a
officer,
minute.
I hereby invoke my constitutionally protected right to counsel of choice before answering any questions. And, officer, do you intend to inflict injury or harm upon me or on my private property in retaliation for my invoking my constitutionally protected rights?
Well, I mean, the next thing that's going to be said is, sir, just give me your license, please. License and registration.
I'm not enjoying a privilege. I'm not charging money. I'm not in commerce, so I don't need a license to charge money.
Sir, calm down. If you do not present a license and registration, I'm going to arrest you for not having one.
I hereby invoke my right to remain silent. My constitutionally protected right to remain silent. I hereby invoke my constitutionally protected right to counsel of choice before answering any questions. Are you going to inflict injury or harm upon me or my private property in retaliation for my invoking my constitutionally protected rights? And then remain silent.
Well, and here lies the dilemma. So we have 2 avenues here. Either he's going to not want to mess with you and hopefully walk away, or he's going to be a steroid head and he's going to drag you out of the car. So at that point, when you're arrested for a negative, in other words, for not producing anything that he wants, well, what happens now? Now he's arresting you for not having a driver's license.
Well, if you're not charging money, you're not driving. So So you don't need to have a license to do something you're not doing.
He just used force on you, and he's going to take you to jail.
Well, that's what courts are for. You have to sue these guys for violating the law. They're supposed to enforce the law, not violate the law. And we've been far too lax in letting them get away with intimidating people. And that's the reason they've become so bold and brazen, because they no longer represent the people, and they no longer protect the people's private property rights to life, liberty, and private property free from infringement. They're out doing the infringing to make money for the communist BAR Lawyer Club.
So basically what you're saying is when they approach you, they are making all the assumptions that they are trained to make. And unless you do a good job rebutting those presumptions, which half of them will probably not understand what you're saying, they're going to use force against you, and then you have to handle it in court. So we'll get back to come back after the break. We'll take some phone calls from people who probably have similar questions, and stay with us. Back.
Don't give yourselves to brutes, men who despise you, enslave you, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel, who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men, machine men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines, you are men. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful. Let us use that power to make this life a wonderful adventure. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world to do away with greed. A world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Do not despair. The hate of men will pass and dictators die. And the power they took from the people will return to the people. Let us all unite.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Corporation Nation. You're on Republic Broadcasting Network. We have with us today No Tax Man at DMV.com, and we are talking about, well, the legal fraud that happens all throughout our lives. So let's continue with this scenario, because there's one thing that's biting at me right now, and that is, one of the reasons I did not pursue or take interest in some of the methods out there is because I figured out real quick, why would I want to utilize the Uniform Commercial Code, or UCC, because that's still absorbing a status. It's still being a person. I mean, you're not escaping the government harassment by becoming. I've not met very many people who were successful in utilizing, say, the UCC1 form or UCC3, putting all their property into a trust. Essentially, it's still within the government. That's what bothers me about that aspect of it. So you're pulled over, a cop is demanding, a municipal police officer who is appointed, not elected, is demanding your driver's license and your registration in order to fulfill what we just talked about, was the person, place, and thing. This is the part where everybody says to go in different directions. Now,
Carl Lentz has an interesting approach. He says, when the cop says, "Let me see your driver's license," he says, "Is that an order?" And eventually the cop will say, "Yes, that's an order." And that's when Carl Lentz says, "Okay, what's the mailing address of your superior?" And the cop will say, "Why do you need that?" And Carl says, "Well, you've just placed an order with me. I need an address to send the bill to your superior for me complying with your order, fulfilling your order." And he will not know what to do. They did not cover that in his cop training course, and he'll run back to the microphone on the radio and ask his whoever is in charge of the
does he present a fee
radio
schedule?
And ask him what to do when somebody says, "Is that an order?" And he wants the address to send the bill for fulfilling the order.
Right.
Usually they come back and say, "Have a nice day, stay off my beat," and don't speed and be sure to tighten your seatbelt or whatever. They don't want to fool with them. They just drop it and move on to the next poor dumb sucker who will not know to do that, and they'll just pay up. Because they're only interested in extortion and getting the money, not complying with the law or protecting people's rights to private life, liberty, and private property free from infringement.
Sure. I mean, here in Utah or in Salt Lake City, they passed a law, a quota law, that said that each police officer has to collect a certain amount of revenue through the ticket process, and they, if they don't do it, they'll lose their jobs. So, I mean, obviously, extortion is apparently a good thing when it comes to feeding your family. So, I mean, they're going to find people to fill these shoes, regardless of how much you and I.
A lot of this presumption, they're making a mistake by making those presumptions, and the mistake is one of the fundamental underlying principles of law applicable in your state code section 1-103. The word mistake is one of those fundamental underlying principles. And once you raise that there's a mistake on the record, their whole court has to shut down and stop because they cannot proceed on a falsified record. And if you point out that there is a mistake and the record is not accurate, they cannot proceed. They have to stop. They cannot pass go, and nobody gets $200. One guy won his court case completely by saying, in fact, he was a famous ball player, Kobe Bryant, out in California. He just raised that they're making a mistake. There's a mistake. And he kept saying there's a mistake in the record, and they had to drop his charges, dismiss the case, because he raised that there was a mistake. And it doesn't matter who made it or what the mistake is. They cannot proceed on the falsified record. Once you raise that there is a mistake, that raises the issue of a falsified record, and they cannot proceed. Just like they cannot proceed on a subject matter contract when there is no authorized signature. If it's an unauthorized signature, it's a forgery. And you and I cannot be held to a document or contract bearing a forged signature once you and I say that's not my authorized signature, and by them presuming otherwise, they're making a mistake under their own code section, number 1-103, along with those other underlying reasons, bankruptcy or other validating or invalidating causes. But you and I have to raise and confront their presumptions, and when they do not comply with the law and do what they're supposedly sworn to do, and as an officer, supposedly a law enforcement officer, then we have to sue them for breach of their fiduciary duty that they voluntarily incurred by putting on the wide hat and the sunglasses and the badge and the gun and taking the oath. And now they have to comply. And if they fail, you and I have to sue them for not complying, which is a breach of their fiduciary duty that they undertook.
Well, so then I guess the question becomes, where then will you proceed with your lawsuit? Because this is one of the things that we've certainly been hitting on a lot is the last place you want to be is in a municipal court where the jurisdiction is not general. You're basically giving up all your rights when you go into a municipal court. So what is your advice as far as to get this into an actual court of the record, where you can actually invoke such things as you mentioned the protection of rights through the Constitution, which is not something that a private person can really claim. So I'm just curious what your...
Yeah, that's mainly what we do is research and education, and we try to teach people how to stay out of court and avoid getting involved in these contracts and court issues by using that strategy, number one, and depriving them of the due process requirements. In order for them to proceed against you and I, they have to accomplish all three of the due process requirements, the first of which is they have to serve us with proper service of process. Number one. Number two, they have to serve us with written notice, not telephone calls or verbal talk, but written notice. And three, they have to obtain consent by contract in order to proceed. And by implementing Howard's strategy number 1, we deprive them of being able to accomplish the service of legal process or notice of process, and deprive them of serving us a written notice, and deprive them of obtaining consent by a written contract. And that's guaranteed under the Declaration of Independence, which is part of the organic Constitution. It very clearly says that governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. Well, when you implement Howard's strategy number 1, you deprive them of that consent or presumption that you're consenting, and they cannot proceed. They cannot docket the case because you deprive them of those due process prerequisites. That's why his strategy number 1 is so effective.
All right, we'll be back. We'll take Richard in Alabama. Anyone else wants to call in and get some answers here? 1-800-313-9443 for the RBN hotline, and we'll be back.
The mission was successfully completed. Reality.
Neighbor, welcome again to this neighborhood. I'd like to show you something. You know what this is? Or maybe if I press this button. There are so many things to learn about in this world, and so many people who can help us learn, and so many people who can help us. Did you ever do anything in the garden of your mind?
Now, sir, I am finding, and I don't know how to say this, and I don't want it to come off in the wrong way. This is a genuine question here. I find a flaw with the presentation you just made, because my question to you is, how can you claim to have constitutional rights, which are political rights, they are not natural rights, and then at the same time claim that you are not a party to the government that is trying to force you into this contract? It doesn't seem logical to claim a status while claiming that you're not part of a status. There's a confusion there. I'd like you to clear up for me.
Well, live people do not have constitutional rights. Only government workers need constitutional rights. The actual people have inherent, God-given natural rights, which are secured against infringement by the Constitution.
Why would you then claim constitutional rights?
I didn't claim that. I'm sorry if you heard that. I didn't. I don't recall.
Well, you use the Constitution. I mean, if you use the Constitution in a court of equity, a court of law, basically, they'll tell you, ha ha ha, you don't have any. There's no such thing as constitutional rights for you to claim
because you're a
private person.
Entered into a contract in their commercial court. There's a reason it's not constitutional, because it's absolutely in compliance with the Constitution. The Constitution very clearly says the right to contract shall be unimpaired.
Right.
So they're absolutely being sure that our right to contract is unimpaired. The problem is they're tricking us into constantly contracting and recontracting, and they are unimpairedly enforcing the terms of these contracts that people have been tricked into. And that's what we teach people, how to avoid being tricked and avoid falling for their traps, avoid the appearance trap, avoid the acceptance trap, and the subsequent contract that results from that. And you're
all right, well, let's take a call from a listener. Let's take Richard in Alabama. Richard, are you on the line? All right, apparently we lost Richard.
So I'm gone?
What's that?
Am I gone?
Richard?
Yeah?
Oh, okay, there you go. Go ahead, sir.
All right. In Alabama, they have a bad habit of doing things with direct action. They don't call you to court. Like, for instance, they will tax your land in the name of a former owner and sell it off, or they'll sue your land in rem, make service on a former owner, or they'll tow away your car and not even write a ticket. You have any ideas?
Yeah. Send me an email, notaxman@dmv.com. That stands for Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia, not the Department of Motor Vehicles. Anyway, and we'll send you the email on how to terminate that registration of your deed into the public records, and then your land will no longer be subject to their code enforcement benefits that they inflict, that you got tricked into. Now, on your car, when you bought the car brand new from the dealership, let's assume you paid cash for it, they stole your evidence of ownership, your document of title, which in the case of a car or automobile is called the MSO, the Manufacturer Statement of Origin. They did not give you, when you gave them the cash money, they did not give you the Manufacturer's Statement of Origin. They stole it and gave it to the Communist Lawyer Club's agency called the Department of Motor Vehicles, which keeps the actual MSO, and then they issue you a certification or a sworn statement called a certificate of title, but it's got their state's name at the top, so they are showing you that it's actually the state's or the Department of Motor Vehicles' car that they are allowing you to use or operate on condition that you comply with all the rules and regulations and code statutes and ordinances that apply to vehicles in commerce on the presumption that you're going to use it to charge money with and be in commerce with it. And that's where they make the mistake under 1-103, the presumption that you're going to use it to charge money. The point is the dealer was forced to do that and enter into collusion and conspiracy with the Department of Motor Vehicles to steal your private property car's document of title, the MSO. It's right in the dealership contract. He does not get to have his dealership license unless he agrees to steal the customer's MSOs and send them or take them immediately up to the lawyer corporation's Department of Motor Vehicles, which, again, it's a taking of private property without the just compensation because they're taking the evidence of ownership, the MSO, without giving you the just compensation. And then they're coercing you into complying with all these rules and regulations, but they've never given you the just compensation. And that's converting your exercise of a right into a crime, and that's unconstitutional for them to do that, to convert your exercise of a right into a crime or to, in our case, charge money for. They do that constantly.
Well, now, as I understand it, the MSO, once it's out of the dealer's hands, it doesn't. Is it gone permanently, or is it they make a microfiche of it or a copy of it, and then it's basically gone? I mean, I asked for mine.
They do that all the time. They lie and say it's been destroyed. They've hypothecated it or pledged it and borrowed money on it without telling you about that. But Ralph Winterrout, who is another talk show host on RBN, he does research into, and he's got a page explaining how you can regain your MSO back from the Department of Motor Vehicles. So anyone who would be interested in that, send a request to notaxman@dmv.com and ask for how to regain your MSO, and we'll be glad to forward that email back to you on how Ralph Winterrout's process works.
All right. Richard, anything else?
How about when they sue your land in rem and make service on a previous owner and get a judgment against your land in rem?
That's because the previous owner had the deed recorded in the public property records, and they're not selling the land. They're only selling their interest in the land, which is zero, because they never gave the former owner, whose name it was in, they never gave him the just compensation either.
Yeah.
Or either.
The land never moves, they're selling the paper or
it's a fraudulent claim of an interest that they never paid for.
Right.
And that poor lady up in New London, Connecticut, Mrs. Kelo, Suzette Kelo and her neighbors that sued the town of New London, Connecticut for a taking without, they should have sued as a taking without just compensation, but the lawyers conveniently forgot to mention that they never got paid. They just raised all these other issues, and the court went along with the issues that were raised instead of what the lawyers for Suzette Kelo should have raised, that they never got the just compensation, and the taking by registration of the deed was a taking of private property without the just compensation, and unconstitutional is what the lawyers for Suzette Kelo should have raised. But then they wouldn't have been lawyers. They would have been disbarred for having raised it.
I was going to actually say something similar. All right, thanks.
You can
Richard,
terminate that registration and get your land back. That'll be in that email you request about IRS, how to unvolunteer from IRS, and how to remove your private property land from the public property records. That'll be in that email.
All right. Well, let's take Mike in Kentucky. Do you have a question?
Yeah. Hey, I think he must have been listening on the internet and had a several second delay before he heard you guys answer the
yeah,
and before he heard you call for his call.
Oh shoot! I'm sorry, Mike, but I hear the music, so I'm going to have you hold on, and we'll start with you fresh on the other side. Okay? All right, we'll be back, folks. Stay with us.
Derivatives, quantitative easing, trade imbalances, recession, low GDP, nations close to collapsing, and subprime loans, foreclosed homes, and people's taxes spent to bail out too big to fail AAA banks again. Fear levels rising as the US crash seems imminent, having smashed the debt ceiling of 14 trillion. Despite protests and clashes in Athens streets, the IMF imposed structurally unjust programs in Greece. In fact, the term economy entered our language from the Greek,
which is the excuse me, the escapeharassment.com website, and their research website, which is peoples-rights.com. I'll tell you what, go ahead, Mike. I know you had a comment or question.
Yeah, when they clicked me over, I couldn't hear part of what you said there. What'd you say?
Just telling you to go ahead and
okay.
State your business.
Yeah, well, I've been, I don't know, what would we say, investigating what I guess was commonly called the Patriot Movement, or I don't know, now they call them the Sovereign Citizens Movement, and a bunch of different names like that they're schooling.
That's an impossibility.
I know. But
you can't be a sovereign and be a citizen member of something.
Right.
Members of.
It's an oxymoron. But,
and I notice also here that Howard Griswold says, and I'm not familiar with Howard Griswold, but he says 99% of the crap that's out there on the internet is wrong, at least the Patriot stuff, unfortunately. So I think these guys probably agree with you, sir.
Well, there's a lot of methods out there, and I've seen some of it actually work, but I think in individual situations you're dealing with individual officials that decide, well, we're just not going to fool with this guy. We're going to send this to the mountain demure, I think is the term I used to hear, that you want to make something go away, disappear off the docket, that kind of thing. This guy's going to be in trouble. Let's just, make this go away sort of thing. And I mean, I know a guy that drove around for quite a few number of years. He had used I think a British West Indies license and a license plate, or I mean, he did a bunch of weird stuff that he got away with. And when he would get pulled over, and the highwayman or whatever would ask for his credentials and all that sort of stuff, they'd write him up, and he'd have to. I don't think he ever got his car towed. I don't know what he said to these police, that they never left him. They never bothered to, impound his car. But he would go prior to any arraignment and issue a private demand for a bill of particulars and that kind of stuff, even before it got before the bar, because his contention was that once you're called down on the carpet before the bar, your status changed and you've conceded jurisdiction. So you have to approach these people in their private capacity. And, of course, I've noticed in the last few years the entrances to the courts are separate for any officials, and they'll have like iron gates up there, and they have remote control so they can go in and you can't. It opens the gate by remote, and they get to go in there and go in a separate entrance. You can't approach these people unless you know where their law office is. It's like they've kind of tried to circle the wagons and make sure you don't have access to them before you get before the bar. In Kentucky now, and I consider the only thing I try to emphasize is that my name is Michael and I'm a man upon the soil, because I understand there's just all these different bodies of law, private law international, And contract, of course, as you alluded to, the Constitution says you should not impair contracts. Well, obviously, there's got to be a meeting of the minds, or there is no contract. If you're misled, especially most of us at my age and older, we're misled into thinking, yes, you must do this or you must do that, and that becomes threat, duress, and coercion, basically, because you were underage if you signed a Social Security application to get a number. You didn't know the full implications of all those contracts and the thousands and thousands of laws that apply and change your status. And what was that celebrity guy, the athlete or something that you said he was claiming?
Kobe Bryant.
Kobe Bryant.
He made a mistake under 1-103.
There's numerous mistakes, and they just overlook them. The whole venue proceeds under assumption and presumption, does it not?
That's why we teach, do not enter into those contracts and avoid falling for the appearance trap and the acceptance trap, and then there is no contract. Right in the Constitution, they're only authorized 3 types of taxes: the imposts, excises, and duties.
Duties, yeah.
Well, if you're involved in importing or exporting, then you're concerned with imposts and duties. So the only remaining thing, since most of us are not involved in importing or exporting, excises are a tax in return for a privilege or benefit. And that's always requested by a contract, to have that privilege or excise. You ask for the privilege or benefit, and then the tax and the regulations apply. That's why Howard teaches, do not accept these offers. Or, first of all, the offers are void for not being what you and I think they are. We're told in school that the offer is supposed to be a meeting of the minds and an agreement set down in black and white on paper. And that's not true. They're not an agreement. When he gives you a ticket for something, that's not an agreement. That's not a offer. It's not a valid offer because it's not a meeting of the minds.
Well, he does.
Therefore, these offers are void and should be not accepted. And that's what strategy number 1 teaches people, how to not accept these bogus offers. Or
well, the key word here is obviously offer. It's not a demand. It's not a requirement. It's nothing but an offer, and that's the most important thing, because all of this is voluntary. It's all based on you being coerced, and we defined the word illicit. When a cop elicits you to do something, he's using word magic and trickery of words to make you do that. In fact, the word spell.
Honestly, he doesn't know.
Words, obviously. So I mean, it's voluntary, and that's the whole point of this, and that's why I think this first thing you're talking about is actually the most important step, and if you can really utilize that, then you'll never be in this situation.
Yeah, you'll never get to an arraignment because you pull the jurisdiction presumption rug out from under them by implementing Howard's strategy number 1 and avoiding a contract arising in the first place, because without the appearance or acceptance of the document or the letter or the presentment or offer, there is no contract until it's the acceptance. That's the definition of a contract, is an offer, acceptance of that offer, at which point a contract arises by law, by the acceptance, and the offeror can no longer withdraw the offer, and both parties are immediately, upon the acceptance, both parties are immediately bound and held to specific performance of that newly arisen contract by acceptance. And that's why strategy number 1 is so effective, because it prevents and defeats their presumption of acceptance, and there is no contract, and then they cannot proceed, because if there's no contract, there's no authority. There's case after case after case. No contract, no jurisdiction, no authority to proceed.
And if that sounds familiar to people, it's because you're usually hearing it in the form of, we teach, do not accept. That way there is no contract. Da, 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 da.
Oh, the commercial you guys play.
Yeah. It's just it's funny to hear it.
And you deal with people that are trained and they're pushing their policy that they are familiar with, and of course there's all these, I guess you'd call them seminars or sessions where they're teaching all these people that are in office oh, you got one of these patriots or you got one of these sovereign citizens, they won't listen to you. You try to get stuff in there that would preserve defects for appeal, defects of process or errors, I guess, for appeal. But they seem to just go ahead and proceed.
You're talking about appeal from a court?
Huh?
You're talking about appeal from a court?
Well, if they go ahead and proceed and ignore what you're saying.
Well, that's why if you fail to implement strategy number 1, you absolutely will go to jail or pay the fine. You pay or go to jail for...
Well, you can implement it all you want if they want to ignore it.
If there is no contract, they cannot proceed.
Well, they think they can, and what do you do otherwise? I mean, if they think they can...
Sue them for deprivation of your due process rights.
Well, yeah, and that's, again, there's nothing you can do, literally, about a man who uses under the color of law his office or his badge to harm you if he feels like he has that power. You do not want to get yourself killed trying to play the game of words with a psychopath. So at some point you're going to have to say, okay, I'm not going to put my life at risk just because I'm right and you're wrong. You're going to have to go through that kind of process. And
so the procedure then becomes to try to make sure that you have record or proof that can be preserved for appeal. And I think in their profession, they do not like, especially, like at the county level and the lower courts, they do not want any appeals of their procedures. The higher ups, I think, really frown on that, and they don't like for that to happen.
Yeah, they want the revenue generation mechanism undisturbed.
Run smoothly. I was going to say something about Jack Kevorkian. If you want to hold me through the break, can you do that?
Sure. We've got other callers too. So
okay.
Real quick, and then we'll bring you on. But stay with us, folks. Last segment of Operation Nation. We do have some other calls on the line. My friend Mike, do you want to say anything else?
I started to mention, bill of particulars and that sort of stuff because the courts are arraigned, and you don't know how they're arraigned unless they'll tell you. And in most states, I think you have the right to demand to know exactly what you're involved in. Not just the statute that they're charging you for, but the nature and the cause of the action against you. Jack Kevorkian, they didn't have a statute for what he was trying to do 20 years ago, and it's about the time I started looking into all this, militia movement, patriot, and da-da-da, and I found that there was some stuff that they were claiming that was actually true. Went to law libraries and looked it up, and it started making me, wanting to investigate it more. And then it hit the news that, gee willikers, after I'd talked to different police officers, and they were like, there is no common law anymore. Well, they didn't have a statute to charge Jack Kevorkian with what he was doing, physician-assisted suicide in, like, Wisconsin or Minnesota, somewhere where they finally brought him down on the carpet. So what they did was they arraigned the court in common law in order to be able to charge him. And, that totally blew everything out of the water that I'd been told that there is no common law anymore. It had been done away with or phased out or whatever.
Well, have you ever considered what the word extortion means? I mean, they took away the tort process and replaced it with extort. They, it's a mess, the system. But I mean, as we talked about yesterday, you have to establish the status first, and then you have to establish the jurisdiction. And
you have a right to know what your status is, but they ignore you when you lay that out in a motion or something. They just restate the charge and try to identify you as their artificial person or their U.S. citizen or whatever they think you are.
All right, Mike. Then, we're going to go to Tom in Pennsylvania. Tom, you on the air?
Him, sir. Hold on. I'm trying to get off the speaker here. And there we go. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, good evening, gentlemen. I have a real quick question first to the gentleman from No Tax. Howard Griswold. I used to have a friend named Howard Griswold probably 20 years ago down in Baltimore, Maryland. He used to live he lived in Delaware. Is this not the same Howard, is it?
Yes, it is exactly the same man.
Oh, you're kidding me. I've been looking for him for over 25 years.
Well, send me an email, and I'll pass it through to him.
Oh, my goodness.
He's feeling under the weather these days, but I'll contact him and ask him if he wants to get back in touch with you, either by telephone or email. Just send
What's your opinion of Mr. Griswold, then?
Just send it to notaxman@dmv.com.
Notaxman at
DMV.com. Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia.
Okay. Oh, I looked at DMV.com, and it looks like a motor vehicle website.
Well, that's not my server. My email server is Delmarva Online Corporation out of Salisbury, Maryland, and it's there. The DMV is theirs, not mine.
Yeah, okay, so notaxman at DMV.com.
And I'll pass your message through to Howard, yeah.
Him and I and several other people, probably about 10 or 15. You ever heard of Ed Ellison?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think he passed away, but him and I and Howard and there was about a dozen of us down there, Free State Constitutionalists, that used to have meetings all the time, and that was back... oh, my goodness, 85, 86, 87 era, and we were discussing the UCC and contract law and all that. Howard is a brilliant man. It's just unbelievable that
we only teach
what's
what
going
works
on in his
and what's
head.
going to be proven to work, that Howard has proven through the years does work.
I know.
That's what we teach.
All right, well, I'm glad
having been in law enforcement, you're telling me, being law enforcement for probably 20-some years, I'm looking at, when you started talking about the sovereign citizen movement, I pulled out an alert. And basically this thing is situation awareness, recent sovereign citizen activity.
It's an impossibility. You cannot be a citizen and a sovereign. Sovereigns are not members of
this is what law enforcement is putting out to their people, okay? Right. This is what we are being advised to, like if officers make a stop, all right? The sovereign citizen movement is a right-wing extremist movement. Sovereign citizens do not recognize federal state authority. Members have been known to engage in criminal activity, commit violent acts, target government officials and law enforcement. FBI considers the movement a domestic terrorism group. Sovereign citizen known to carry and create fraudulent documents, identification card, driver's license, motor vehicle registration, law enforcement credentials. Sovereign citizen has also been known to impersonate law enforcement. Okay, they're filling these guys' heads with, if people are doing this, they don't deserve the name of a sovereign. People like that the people that we're trying to do not do these kind of things.
This stuff is coming straight from the... It's coming straight
I know
from the
you.
ADL.
I know you don't. I know you don't have anything to do with that. Center. What I'm trying to do is tell you what they are telling the officer on the street. And the problem is their feedback on that is, well, if you're not threatened with being sued, then you're not doing your job right. Okay, so they've got an issue on their side. We've got problems on our side. All this is piling up, and it's sooner or later somebody's going it's going to get really bad in the wrong situation with the wrong person on both sides, and somebody's going to end up wounded or dead or something like that, and that's going to be a real disaster. But
that's why
it's a real big mess.
We teach to come out from and withdraw and do not participate and do not be in their system.
Absolutely. Yes, I know. Well, but trying to get out of their system is like trying to break out of jail. Okay?
Not really. It's very simple.
No. Come on. If you've been in this as long as I have, it's not that simple. I get pulled over. I say, sorry, I don't have a driver's license because I'm not a driver. And he's going to look at you like you're a three-headed monster. And if it gets to the point where you just continue to insist on that, he's going to drag you out and he's going to lock you up. Okay?
Well, think about it.
Well, I know. You can sue them all you want, but they're not going to listen to that. Okay? You can go into court, and unless you really know what the heck you're doing, and even if you do, you get in front of a judge that's not going to listen or doesn't want to hear it, you're going to jail. Period. Okay? It's very sad, and I believe in what you do and what you say, and I believe that we should be able to do what you're telling us on the radio. But fact and fiction is two different things.
Say you're not enjoying a privilege right now.
I wholeheartedly agree. But then I even heard where they said, "Well, do you have a checking account?" Well, I don't have a driver's license, but I have a checking account. But okay, remember, you ever heard of a guy named George Gordon?
Yeah, with the barristers in common law.
They got so mad at him that they dug a pit across his driveway to keep him off the roads because they couldn't stop him from going out on the highways. And every time they stopped him, they ended up getting sued, and he beat the pants off them. But he's one in a million. Okay, he has a school up there, but I'm telling you, he's one of the very few people that really was able to, turn this thing around. And now they just don't bother him at all. But he doesn't have a bank account. He doesn't have a Social Security number. He doesn't use paper money. He only takes gold and silver. He doesn't have insurance, and then how are you going to drive a vehicle without a license plate on it? Because if you have a vehicle and you're participating, you're driving around on the highway, you're traveling around on the highway with a vehicle, you don't have a license plate on there, you're going to get stopped every
Well, if you're not
minutes.
using it to charge money with, it's not a vehicle in commerce. It's a private property
I understand. Your theory is correct. But in actuality, it doesn't work.
It's called the definitions of words. People need to learn the correct.
Sir, I understand all that, okay? I've been doing this since 1970. Let's see, when the heck did I start this? 1979.
I hate to break this love charade up, but we do have to end the show here.
Thank you. I'll send you an email for Howard, though. Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right, bye-bye.
Yeah, I'd say there's the trickery again, because using the word vehicle, of course. If you admit that it's a vehicle, then you've just admitted it's a piece of property. So, anyway, sir, thank you very much. Give out your email one more time, just in case.
Taxman@dmv.com.
All right, guys. Callers, I apologize I didn't get to you. I tried. Join me Monday for what I call total genealogical immersion. Should be fun. One of my favorite subjects. Talk to you later.